I was sitting there in the familiar kitchen of my parents' home in Toledo, Ohio, with a plate of cold grilled meat in front of me. I am Andrew Collins, 32 years old, working as a supervisor at an auto parts manufacturing plant. My life had finally stabilized after years of struggling, a steady job, a small private apartment, and obligation-free weekends. But tonight the atmosphere in the house was completely different. Usually family dinners were filled with laughter and casual stories about the workday, but today the clinking of knives and forks against plates sounded dry and harsh like metal scraping against stone. No one was speaking. No small talk. No laughter. Only a heavy silence enveloped everything, making the air feel thick and oppressive, pressing down on my chest. I glanced around the table. My father, Frank Collins, sat at the head as always, his face stern, deep wrinkles etched around his eyes. He was mechanically cutting his meat, but his gaze kept darting toward me, probing heavy looks as if he were judging me for something I didn't yet know about. My mother, Diane, sat beside him, her hands trembling as she held her fork, and she was doing the same, glancing at me, then looking away. My younger brother, Noah, sat across from me, head bowed low over his plate. His shoulders were hunched as if he were trying to shrink himself and avoid all eyes. Noah was only 22, about to graduate from college, and had always been the family's pride and joy. But tonight he looked like a child caught doing something wrong. Pale-faced, lips tightly pressed together. My heart began to beat faster. Something was very wrong here. I could feel it clearly, like a chill running down my spine. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice calm, intending to ask, "What's wrong with everyone? Is something going on?" But before I could speak, my father slammed his hand down on the table. The loud thud made the plates and glasses rattle slightly. He looked straight into my eyes, shattering the silence like a bomb exploding. My father's voice was low and deep, but full of weight. "Andrew, we need to talk about Noah." I blinked, trying to process it. My brother? He still kept his head down, not looking up. My mother suddenly burst into tears, her choked sobs ringing out, leaving me stunned. My heart sank as if gripped by an invisible hand. Why was she crying? What could be so serious? I turned toward her, about to comfort her, but my father continued, not giving me a chance. "Noah is involved in a serious criminal case," he said slowly but firmly, like he was reading a verdict. "If things go too far, he could go to prison, and that's very likely." His words hit me like a punch to the chest. A criminal case? My brother? The spoiled kid who had always been the center of every meal, every family decision? I turned to look at Noah, but he remained bowed, his shoulders trembling as if he could barely hold himself up. My mother's crying grew louder, choked and uncontrollable. Tears streaming down her cheeks, completely shattering the heavy silence in the kitchen. I tried to swallow, my mind reeling. "What happened, Dad? What did Noah do?" I asked, my voice shaking, but my father didn't answer directly. He looked at me, his gaze sharp, and continued, "Andrew, you're the older brother. You know Noah is still young, about to graduate college. He has his whole future ahead of him. Your brother needs a chance to make things right." I frowned, trying to piece together the scattered words. Make things right? Future? Those familiar concepts floated past me vaguely. Then he said it, his voice still calm and resolute, as if he'd been thinking about it for a long time. "I want you to take the blame for Noah." The world around me seemed to stop. Take the blame? Go to prison in place of my brother? I was frozen, my mind blank. At 32, when everything had just stabilized, my job, my independent life, all of it suddenly felt fragile, like a house of cards that could collapse at any moment. I felt blood rushing to my ears, my heartbeat thundering over my mother's crying. I stammered, "I don't understand. Take the blame for Noah? What do you mean?" My father sighed, a heavy sigh as if he were carrying the weight of the entire room. He looked up at me, his eyes no longer evasive, but carrying the cold calculation of someone who had thought long and hard before speaking. "Noah can't miss out on college," he said slowly, each word falling onto the dinner table as if carefully weighed. "He's only a short time away from graduating. If he gets prison time now, not only will his degree be ruined, but his entire future will be over." He paused for a beat as if to ensure I was listening. You understand, Andrew. This society doesn't give people many chances to start over. A criminal record at his age will follow Noah for life. No one will hire him. No one will trust him. There'll be no way back. I frowned, trying to connect the fragmented words he'd just said. Make amends, future, opportunity, those dangerously familiar concepts. Because throughout my childhood, I'd heard them repeated over and over, and every time, they were used to justify why I had to take the loss. Then my father said it again, his voice still calm, even more persuasive than coercive. I'm asking you to take the blame for Noah. The space seemed to freeze. Before I could even react, he continued, as if afraid I'd have time to think. You're the older brother, Andrew. You aren't married yet. You don't have kids. You aren't tied down by the responsibilities that Noah hasn't even had yet. You can sacrifice some time without destroying your entire life. He looked at me, his expression stern but certain. You're stronger than your brother. You've always been that way from the time you were little. You've shouldered things for the family many times before. I believe you can get through this. But Noah can't. If he goes to prison, he'll fall apart completely. Those words stirred in me a painfully familiar feeling. The feeling of always being the one to step up and take responsibility whenever the family was in trouble. Since I was young, I'd grown used to stepping back a pace to keep everything calm. But this time, the price was my freedom. My mother could no longer hold it in. She burst into tears, her voice choked, almost pleading. Andrew, I'm begging you. You're our family's last hope now. If you don't save your brother, I don't know how I'll go on living. She leaned closer to me, her hands trembling. Noah is still so young. He's never had to endure the harsh things out there. You're his older brother, you understand? Family is everything. What do we have besides family, son? Before I could respond, Noah suddenly stood up abruptly. He walked over to me and dropped to his knees hitting the floor with a harsh thud that stung my ears. Noah's voice trembled, tears streaming uncontrollably. Brother Andrew, I'm begging you. I'm really scared. I can't go to prison. I can't live in a place like that. I won't survive it. He bowed his head lower, his voice nearly breaking. Just this once, I swear. From now on, I'll live properly. I won't let you carry anything else for me ever again. I promise. My parents continued pressing me with promises stated very specifically and clearly. You won't have to pay the price alone, my father said firmly. While you're in there, we'll take full care of you. Money, supplies, whatever expenses are needed, you won't lack anything. He looked straight at me. After you finish your sentence, you won't be abandoned. This house will still be your home. If you don't want to live with us, we'll help you get a proper place of your own to start your life over. Then he continued, his voice lowering but more resolute. If you need assurance, we're willing to transfer part of the assets to you after you're out. This isn't an empty promise. It's compensation for the years you'll have to suffer. I sat there amid my mother's crying, my brother's pleas, and the promises carefully wrapped in the word family. Reason told me this was wrong. But the responsibility of being the older brother, something instilled in me since I was very young, gripped me so tightly I could barely breathe. I was silent for a long time, looking down at the table to avoid meeting anyone's eyes. After everything I'd just heard, I understood that every choice had already been arranged and my role was simply to accept it. I let out a soft breath, my voice low and weary. All right. If that's what everyone has decided, I'll take the blame for Noah. My parents joyfully hugged me tightly. My mother cried tears of relief. My father patted my shoulder repeatedly. Noah remained kneeling, repeatedly bowing in gratitude, his voice trembling. Thank you, Brother Andrew. I swear I will never forget what you've done for me. But I stood still, clearly feeling that I had just crossed a boundary from which there was no return. I had traded my own future and stable life for what I'd always been taught was family. My heart felt heavy, like a stone weighing me down. Would they truly remember this favor? Would I regret it? The kitchen air now felt warmer to them, but to me it remained stifling, filled with foreboding. In the days following that fateful dinner, my life turned into a suspended nightmare. My parents called constantly, not to ask how I was doing, but to confirm whether I had changed my mind. "You're still keeping your word, right, Andrew?" my father would ask, his voice laced with anxiety and pressure, as if he feared I might run away. "Don't let everything fall apart, son." My mother would cry over the phone, repeating the familiar line that the whole family was counting on me. I responded briefly and mechanically, as if it were an obligation I had to fulfill. But after each call, I felt myself being tightened one more turn. They didn't ask how I was eating, whether I could sleep at night, or if my job at the factory was still going well. In those conversations, I was no longer a son. I was just a chess piece already placed on the board, waiting for my turn to be moved. I lived in a daze, going to work like an automaton. I'd get up in the morning, put on my uniform, drive to the factory in Toledo, and supervise the workers assembling auto parts. But my mind wasn't there. I'd stand watching the production line run, but my eyes blurred from exhaustion. During the day, I tried to smile and chat with colleagues, but they noticed something was off. "Hey, Andrew, you look like you've lost your soul," one friend asked. I shook my head. "I'm fine, just a bit tired." But at night, I barely slept. Lying on the bed in my small apartment, my mind spun between the responsibility I'd accepted and a vague fear of what was coming. Prison. That word had always seemed distant, but now it loomed like a ghost. I imagined cold concrete walls, the slam of iron doors, and endless isolation. Then the images of Noah kneeling and crying, my mother sobbing, my father pleading would flood back, and I'd convince myself again. This is for family. The investigation started quickly, like a whirlwind pulling me in. One morning the phone rang. It was the police summoning me. I went to the station, heart pounding, cold sweat breaking out despite the chilly Toledo weather. They led me into an interrogation room, a small space with an old wooden table and harsh fluorescent lights. "Andrew Collins, you're suspected of involvement in goods smuggling," the officer said, his voice flat like he was reading a report. I swallowed hard, remembering my father's instructions. Admit everything, don't mention Noah. In the hours-long sessions, I confessed to every charge they presented: smuggling cigarettes and alcohol, false declarations, tax evasion. They read the indictments. I nodded and signed the statements without fully understanding their contents. My signature trembled on the paper, but I didn't stop. After the final interrogation, they informed me I was being held in custody awaiting trial. The cold handcuffs clamped around my wrists, and I was led to the police car. Toledo passed by the windows, the familiar streets, the factory where I worked, my small apartment, all fading away. At the jail, the intake process was impersonal. Strip search, issued an ugly orange prison uniform, led down a long, echoing hallway. The slam of iron doors reverberated, the smell of disinfectant and damp concrete clinging to my nose. The first days in detention dragged on slowly, cold and alien. The narrow cell, the hard metal bunk, distant shouts from other cells. I sat huddled, beginning to truly feel the real cost of the choice I'd made. Freedom, something I'd taken for granted, now became a burning longing. I thought about free mornings, hot coffee, the morning radio. Now there were only bland prison meals and crushing loneliness. Frank, Diane, and Noah visited fairly regularly when permitted. We sat facing each other, separated by thick glass, talking through the cold internal phone. I saw the familiar worry on their faces, but as time went on, I increasingly sensed that those looks weren't just concern for me. They were probing to see if I was still holding to my promise. "How have you been lately, Andrew?" my father asked, his voice low and deliberate. I replied that I was okay, that I was managing inside. He nodded, paused for a few seconds, then continued, as if reaffirming what mattered most. "Good, just hang in there for a while. Everything outside is being handled smoothly." My mother gripped the phone tightly, crying as she said how much she missed me, that she couldn't sleep thinking about me. I offered a few comforting words, telling her not to worry, but very quickly her tone shifted. "Noah is trying so hard. He's attending classes regularly. Not slacking at all. Don't worry, everything is on the right track. I listened, was silent for a moment, then just said I understood. I realized the questions about me always ended quickly and the conversation would sooner or later turn back to Noah, as if my presence there was only to ensure he remained safe. Noah looked at me the whole visit. He said, voice trembling, how grateful he was that he'd never forget what I'd done. I'll try to live in a way that's worthy of you, Noah said, repeating that promise over and over. But when I looked into his eyes, I didn't see worry about how I was surviving in here. What I saw most clearly was fear. Fear that if I changed my mind, if I said something different, everything he had outside would collapse instantly. The short visits ended with a heavy feeling. They left. I returned to my cell, not relieved, but more oppressed. I realized their presence didn't ease my heart. It only reminded me I had no way back. I'd confessed, signed the papers, and now everything was like a brakeless wheel hurtling forward. Late at night, lying on the metal bunk, I wondered, do they really care? Or are they just coming to make sure I don't ruin the plan? Doubt gnawed at me like a worm in my heart. The trial was scheduled just a few weeks later, so fast that before I could adjust to the reality, everything was rushed to its conclusion. That morning, I was loaded onto the prison transport in my inmate uniform, hands tightly cuffed. Toledo passed by the small windows as always, the same familiar roads, but I felt like an outsider to that life now. At the courthouse, the courtroom was packed. Reporters, curious faces, and at the back, my family, sitting close together in tense silence. My parents looked visibly older. My mother kept wiping tears, my father holding her hand tightly as if clinging to his last bit of calm. Noah sat beside them, head bowed low, avoiding all eyes, as if by not looking up the truth wouldn't call his name. I stood in the defendant's position with the court-appointed lawyer beside me, a young guy who looked flustered. The judge, a stern older man with glasses, banged the gavel to start. He read out the charges: smuggling goods across the border, false customs declarations, evading hundreds of thousands in taxes. Each word stabbed like a knife into my heart. I just stood still, no defense, no objection, nodding to accept everything stated. "Does the defendant have anything to say?" the judge asked, surprised at my submissive attitude. I shook my head. The lawyer shook his head, helpless before his client's absolute silence. He whispered, "You should say something." But I didn't. I'd promised. Below, Frank and Diane displayed public grief, my mother crying loudly, my father bowing his head as if they were the victims. Noah kept his head down, avoiding all gazes, as if the whole story wasn't directly about him. The prosecutor presented evidence, documents, proof, all pointing to me. I didn't contest it. The trial proceeded swiftly like a scripted play. The judge banged the gavel one last time. Defendant Andrew Collins is sentenced to 5 years imprisonment. The sentence rang out, and I felt my previously stable life collapse completely. 5 years, a long stretch deprived of freedom and future. I imagined the days ahead, incarceration, loneliness, and upon release, what would I have left? Job gone, reputation gone, life shattered. As I was escorted out of the courtroom, I turned back one last time. Amid the unfamiliar faces and cold lights, I found my parents and Noah sitting close together. My mother's eyes were still red, my father still holding her hand tightly, Noah still bowing his head, avoiding looking toward me. In that brief moment, I still convinced myself that this sacrifice would be remembered, that one day they would keep their word, remember what I'd traded to protect the family. I left the courtroom clinging to that fragile belief, unaware that it would be the last time I allowed myself to believe in what was called family. Returning to the prison, everything felt like an endless nightmare with no conclusion. The first days unfolded with a profound sense of disorientation, as if I had been thrust into another world, a place where people were no longer called by their names but existed only as managed entities. The intake process was cold, mechanical, devoid of any emotion. I was led into a narrow room where commands rang out short and sharp, forcing me to strip for inspection, as if I were no longer a human being but merely an object to be inventoried and categorized. The guard issued orders in a flat, monotone voice without looking directly at me. I trembled as I complied, a wave of shame and humiliation rising up, choking every breath. Afterward, they tossed me the orange prison uniform, coarse and stiff, icy cold, the smell of new fabric mixed with harsh disinfectant making me nauseous. As I put it on, I felt like I was donning a completely alien shell, an invisible but unmistakable mark branding me a criminal, even though deep inside I knew I was more innocent than anyone in this place. They led me through long, echoing hallways bathed in glaring fluorescent lights that illuminated everything in a cold, unforgiving way, with no trace of warmth. The rubber soles of the guards' shoes echoed on the concrete floor, and on both sides the eyes of other inmates swept over me, probing wary glances as if sizing up a newcomer. I felt it clearly. Here, silence and keeping to oneself were the safest path. An older inmate with a scarred face whispered through the bars, "Don't look at anyone too long or you'll get into big trouble, got it? Keep your mouth shut to survive." I nodded without speaking, my heart pounding. The iron door slammed shut behind me as they pushed me into the cell. A piercing sound like the closing of a coffin lid that made me flinch, cold sweat breaking out. The cell was cramped, barely enough space for a metal bunk, a toilet, and a small sink. The damp, moldy concrete walls assaulted every sense with the stench of disinfectant and old sweat making me dizzy. I sat on the bunk, hands clutching my head, trying to breathe steadily. This was my new home for the next 5 years. 5 years. That number now felt like an eternal sentence. I thought about my small apartment in Toledo with its comfortable sofa, clean gas stove, and the morning radio. Now all of it was just a distant memory, as if it belonged to another life. From the start, I chose to live withdrawn, avoiding conflict to stay out of trouble. In the communal cafeteria, I ate silently, sitting in a corner, head down, chewing the bland prison food. Dry bread, boiled vegetables, and tasteless cold cuts. No talking to anyone, no lingering glances. The other inmates gathered in groups, laughing and talking loudly, but I kept my distance. Here, anything could lead to trouble. A wrong look, an unnecessary word. I spent most of my time in the narrow cell with my own thoughts, lying on the bunk staring at the ceiling, counting cracks in the concrete to pass the time. The first nights I barely slept. The footsteps of patrolling guards echoed in the hallway, steady like the heartbeat of a giant monster. Distant shouts from other cells, someone arguing, someone crying, someone screaming from a nightmare, jolted me awake. Time passed with cruel slowness, each minute and second stretching endlessly. I lay there, eyes wide open, thinking about my family, about that fateful dinner, about my father's promise. "We'll take care of you." I wondered, what are they doing now? Is Noah focusing on graduating? Is Mom still crying? Those thoughts both comforted and tormented me, making sleep a luxury. In the beginning, Frank, Diane, and Noah visited fairly regularly, usually on weekends, bringing supplies, snacks, clean clothes, a little cash. Those things made me feel I hadn't been completely abandoned, that there was still a thread connecting me to the outside world. Those visits helped me reassure myself that my sacrifice still had meaning, that my family still remembered and needed me. I thought, I'm doing this so Noah can have a future. He'll graduate, get a job, and one day when I'm out, everything will be okay. I told them about prison life, lightly, not wanting to worry them. Things like working in the uniform sewing workshop or reading books to kill time. They nodded, promised to send more supplies. When they left, I returned to my cell feeling a little warmer inside, even if only temporarily. During one visit about 3 months after sentencing, my parents told me Noah had graduated from college. "He had his commencement ceremony last week," my father said, voice full of pride. "Now he's working at a logistics company in Toledo. Good, stable salary. Life is starting to get on a new track." My mother smiled through tears. "Thanks to you, Andrew. If it weren't for you..." I heard the news with a mix of relief and pride, glad my brother had escaped the path I was now on. I whispered, "That's good. He deserves it." But deep down, A quiet ache rose as I realized my own life was being held back behind these cold walls. While Noah stepped into the world with a job, friends, a bright future, I sat here counting days in the dark. Why couldn't it be me? I asked myself silently, but pushed the thought away. This was your choice. Over time, the visits grew less frequent, from weekly to monthly, then only sporadic. Supplies stopped coming regularly, no more snacks, no new clothes. The already sparse conversations dwindled to nothing. At first, I still tried to reassure myself. My parents are busy with work. Noah is focused on settling into life after graduation. Maybe they're just busy. They'll come soon, I told myself, lying on the metal bunk, staring out the tiny barred window. But those excuses gradually rang hollow when no letters arrived, no signs of contact returned. I sent letters home, short ones asking about their health, but received no replies. That silence cut like a knife, slowly slicing into my heart. In the confined space of the prison, I grew accustomed to no one checking on me, no one remembering me. I worked more, sewing uniforms, cleaning the yard, to distract from that quiet loneliness. But it was still there, gnawing at me day by day. I realized I had been left behind long ago, like an old object tossed into a forgotten corner. On those long, silent nights, I felt life outside continuing forward. Noah probably dating, my parents perhaps renovating the house, while my existence gradually became invisible, as if I had never truly belonged there from the start. I lay there listening to the wind whistling through the bars, tears rolling down uncontrollably. "They've forgotten you," a voice in my head whispered. "Your sacrifice was just a joke." Time in prison passed like a murky river, slow, heavy, but relentlessly carrying away everything I once had. I counted the days with small scratches on the cell wall, using my own fingernails like an old habit of those who have no other way to cling to time. 5 years, 1,825 days, finally came to an end. I completed my sentence without any disciplinary violations, even earning recognition for good behavior and rehabilitation, as if that obedience could somehow compensate for the years of life stolen from me. On the day of my release, I stood at the prison gate with an old, worn backpack on my shoulder, containing a few threadbare sets of clothes and the scant personal belongings I had left. For the first time in years, I breathed true free air, the chilly Toledo wind carrying the scent of damp earth and distant highway exhaust. The feeling was both relieving and alien, as if my body had grown accustomed to concrete walls, and the outside world now seemed too vast, too bright. My heart raced with a mix of excitement and anxiety. "I'm free now," I told myself, trying to smile. But that smile quickly faded. I looked around, hoping to see familiar figures, my parents, or at least Noah waiting with an old car. But there was no one. Just me standing alone under the overcast sky, the heavy backpack on my shoulder, my entire remaining possessions after those years in prison. Loneliness crashed over me like a cold wave, sweeping away the initial relief. They had promised to take care of me, to welcome me back. But now, with the prison gate open, I felt like a stray with no support. I swallowed hard, fighting back tears. Maybe they're busy, I consoled myself, but deep down, a doubt that had been creeping in for a long time began to rise. I caught a public bus, sitting in the back row, watching Toledo pass by the window, the familiar streets now strange, as if they belonged to another life. I decided to go back to my parents' house because I had nowhere else to go. I had no savings, everything had vanished in prison, no close friends after years of isolation. I just wanted a temporary place to readjust to life outside before planning further. Finding a job, renting a room, rebuilding from zero. The bus rattled along and I sat there clutching my backpack tightly, my mind swirling with vague plans. I thought, they'll be so happy. Mom will cry, Dad will pat my shoulder, Noah will thank me. But when the bus stopped at the familiar street, my heart began pounding harder, a bad premonition lingering. I walked to the old house, my steps heavy on the cracked sidewalk. The house was the same. Faded white paint, wooden fence, small garden with the flowers my mother had planted. I knocked, my chest tightening. The door opened and my father, Frank, stood there, his face showing no surprise. He just nodded curtly, as if I were a neighbor dropping by rather than a son just released from prison. My mother, Diane, hovered in the kitchen doorway, her eyes avoiding mine, not rushing to hug me as I'd imagined. No questions about the years in prison, no mention of my return. Just heavy silence, and the familiar smell of cooking from the kitchen suddenly making me realize how hungry I was, hungry in body and soul. I stepped inside, backpack still on my shoulder, forcing an awkward, polite smile. "I'm home, Mom and Dad. Finally, I made it back." My father glanced at me briefly, then nodded slightly. "Yeah, good that you're back. At least it's all over now." My mother turned to pour water, not looking at me directly. "The trip here must have been tiring. It's not close from the prison." I sat on the old sofa, placing my backpack at my feet. Release day wasn't anything special. They did the paperwork, returned my personal items, then let me out the gate. It all happened quickly. My father replied flatly, "As long as it's done, that's good. That whole thing, it's in the past now." I waited for the next question about the 5 years in prison, how I'd survived, but the room fell silent again. I took a deep breath and said slowly, "Back then, you said that after I got out, I'd have a stable place to live and there would be compensation." My mother paused for a moment. She set the glass down slowly, not meeting my eyes right away. She spoke, her voice lower. "Andrew, we said that under different circumstances. Things have changed now." My father leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, his voice even and cold. 5 years isn't a short time. Everyone's life has to move forward. What you remembered doesn't always hold the same value anymore." I looked at him, trying to keep my voice steady. "But that wasn't just something said in the heat of the moment. You promised me. I believed in that to accept everything." My mother sighed, as if she were the one exhausted. "You have to understand us. Not every promise can be kept. Some things, if we did them now, would only complicate everything further." I was silent for a few seconds, then continued, my voice hoarse. "Then at least, let me stay for a short while, a few weeks, so I can find a job and arrange my own place. I don't need anything more." My parents exchanged a quick glance. This time my father answered directly, without beating around the bush. "That won't work, Andrew. You just got out of prison. Your presence here would start people talking. We don't want our current life disrupted." My mother nodded in agreement, her voice soft but firm. "This house isn't suitable anymore. Everything has settled into a different routine. If you stayed, it would cause a lot of awkward issues." I stood still, feeling each word pushing me further out of this house. "I'm just asking for a temporary place," I said, almost whispering. "I don't intend to cling." My father looked at me, his eyes distant. "You're an adult now. Everyone has to take responsibility for their own life. We can't carry you forever." Not a word about the promises made, not a question about where I'd go or how I'd live. The words that had been my only anchor were now casually erased, as if they had never existed. They were actively severing their responsibility toward me, as if those 5 years in prison were just something over and done, not needing mention or compensation. In that moment of silence, as the living room air grew as stifling as in prison, I recalled the past, the painful pieces beginning to fit together. From childhood, I had always yielded to my younger brother, taken the blame for him, shouldered responsibility whenever the family faced trouble. When I turned 20, I had a rare opportunity to leave Toledo, a vocational training program in another city, linked to a stable job at a large machine shop, with tuition support and a clear promotion path. It was the first time I saw a future not just revolving around scraping by at work and sending money home. But my parents stopped me. They said outright that the family couldn't support 2 children at once. Noah was only 10 then, with a long road ahead, education and everything they called a proper future. "Noah needs a good starting point," my father said. "You're the older brother, already grown. Sacrificing a little is no big deal." And I agreed. I stayed in Toledo, took a full-time job at the local factory, starting work earlier than I'd ever imagined for my 20s. I gave up that opportunity without complaint, believing it was just temporary. I still remember clearly the time Noah was caught cheating in high school. It was an important test, and he was caught copying right in class. The school immediately called the parents in, mentioning possible discipline and recording the violation in his academic record, something that could directly affect his college applications later. My parents panicked, and then, as always, they turned to me. I was 25 then, working, accustomed to being understanding, to handling the troubles the family didn't want to face. I was called into the principal's office, and I myself said that I had given the answers to Noah, that it was my initiative. In the end, Noah was still punished. The test was invalidated, and he received an internal warning. But his name wasn't entered into the official disciplinary record, he wasn't expelled, and it didn't affect his college applications, while I became the one primarily responsible for the whole incident. Back home, my parents didn't scold my brother, nor did they thank me. My father just said the familiar line lightly, as if it were obvious all along. "As the older brother, you have to know how to carry for the younger one." And in that moment, I realized my sacrifices had never been a choice. They were just a pre-assigned role, something I was expected to fulfill without question or consent. From then on, my sacrificing became taken for granted. I worked grueling hours overtime, sending money home regularly. While I was tied to the assembly line and long night shifts, Noah grew up, went to school, then prepared for college, with the assurance that there was always an older brother behind him bearing the load. No one thanked me. No one mentioned it again. Everything was seen as natural. And now, after 5 years in prison that I traded to protect my brother, I stood before them like a stranger, as if everything I'd ever given up had never existed. I painfully realized that everything I'd traded, my stable job, my bright future, and even my freedom, had never been seen as a favor, but only as something expected, a convenient solution for others. I was a tool, a cushion for Noah and the family to step over. My heart twisted, tears welling up, but I held them back. Without another word, I quietly stood up, picked up my backpack, turned, and left the house. My parents didn't stop me, didn't ask anything. Just the sound of the door closing behind me, echoing like the slamming prison door years ago. I stepped out onto the street, carrying emptiness and the bitter truth that the place I'd just left was probably no longer my home. Toledo now felt like a foreign city, and I, Andrew Collins, 37 years old, homeless, jobless, familyless. I wandered the familiar streets that now felt distant and cold, my steps heavy under the gray Ohio sky. A light rain fell, soaking through my thin jacket, chilling me from the outside in. I didn't know where to go, only that I needed to find temporary shelter. With the meager release allowance, a few $100s from the state, and what little money I'd managed to save from prison labor, I rented a damp, rundown room in an old working-class neighborhood near the factory's belching smoke. The room was tiny, walls mottled with mold, a rusty metal bed that creaked with every movement, and a pervasive damp smell clinging to everything like a reminder of my prison years. The rent was just affordable, with nothing left over, but at least it was mine. A small corner to breathe, to exist. In the first days after leaving my parents' house, I tried to stand up and start over from zero. I applied for jobs everywhere, from small workshops to the familiar factories around Toledo. I printed resumes at the public library, carefully folding each sheet into my old backpack, a record I had once been proud of. Factory supervisor, over 10 years of experience, solid management skills, and a completely clean past, before the prison sentence erased it all. But in every interview, the question about that 5-year gap inevitably came. "What were you doing during that time?" they'd ask, and I had to admit I'd been in prison. Their eyes changed immediately, from friendly to wary, then polite rejection. Sorry, this position isn't suitable. Every door slammed shut. I submitted dozens of applications from production plants to grocery stores, but was continually turned down. Eventually, I was forced into temporary manual labor, loading and unloading goods in warehouses, night shift cleaning in small factories, wiping down grease-covered machinery. Hourly wages enough for cheap bread, black coffee, and rent. Each morning I woke with an aching body, looking in the mirror at a man older than his years, dark circles under his eyes, unkempt beard. You have to keep going, I told myself, but that harsh life made me withdraw, like a snail retreating into its shell. But that very harshness also made me more observant. I was no longer the naive Andrew who believed in family. I quietly gathered scattered bits of information about them through old neighbors or chance encounters with acquaintances at cheap diners. One afternoon, while loading goods at a warehouse, I ran into the old neighbor, Mr. Bill, who used to live next to my parents. "Andrew, you look so different now," he said, voice full of surprise. I forced a smile and asked about the family. And he told me in a flat tone, like discussing the weather, "Your parents are doing fine. The house has been renovated, fresh paint, beautiful garden. And Noah's getting busier, big business, new car, wide connections." His words cut like a knife. While I struggled to survive, eating cheap sandwiches, sleeping on a hard bed, working to exhaustion, my family had quickly returned to normal life, as if my time in prison had never happened. They renovated the house. Noah succeeded in me. A forgotten ghost. Through those fragmented stories, I gradually understood that my sacrifice was just a chapter they'd closed, never looking back. At night, lying in my rented room, I thought about them. Parents enjoying warm dinners, Noah driving home in his new car, and simmering anger flared up. They're living well because of you, but they've chosen to erase you long ago, the voice in my head whispered. I began following them more discreetly, not stalking, but through casual conversations, through local newspaper mentions of young entrepreneur Noah Collins. He was now a small business owner in logistics, networking with big companies. And me? Still a manual laborer, hands calloused. Then one chance encounter changed everything. It was a pouring, rainy afternoon. I was working the night shift in an industrial area on the outskirts of Toledo, cleaning a small transport warehouse. During break, I stepped outside for fresh air, standing under a narrow overhang to avoid the rain, body exhausted. And then I saw her. Sofia Martinez, Noah's girlfriend. Before I went to prison, I'd met her a few times at brief family dinners, enough to recognize her face immediately. Back then, she was just part of my brother's unfolding life, and I never thought I'd see her again like this. Sofia was walking from the parking lot toward the building, holding an umbrella, wearing a professional coat. When she looked up and saw me, we both froze in the same breath. "Are you Andrew?" she called, voice hesitant. I nodded, forcing a smile. "It's me, Andrew. Long time no see." She didn't avoid me, though clearly hesitant. She stepped under the overhang with me. Rain pattered in front of us, and between us was a strange silence, like between two people who knew each other in a past life. The conversation started cautiously, slowly, as if we were both probing what remained after the lost years. "I didn't expect to run into you here," she said, eyes averted. I immediately noticed her unease and guilt, different from the cold indifference I'd felt from my parents and Noah. She asked about me genuinely. "How are you living now? I mean, since getting out of prison?" I told her briefly about the rented room, the temporary jobs. She listened, eyes welling up. After some back and forth, Sofia sighed, as if she'd been holding a secret too long. "Andrew, I have to tell you. During the time you were in prison, the story about you and the family was told in a completely different way." My heart beat faster. "How did they tell it differently?" I asked, voice hoarse. She glanced around as if afraid someone might hear, then said, "To outsiders, Noah and your parents said you got yourself into trouble, that it was your personal mistake and the family had no choice but to endure it. They never mentioned you taking the blame for him. Not a word. I was stunned, blood rushing to my ears. Personal mistake. I sacrificed my freedom and they portrayed it as if I were the fool who brought it on myself. Sophia continued. After that, Noah quickly achieved his initial successes. All the legal risks he'd been entangled in disappeared and he dove into business as if nothing had happened. She went into more detail, voice trembling. I gradually realized your absence wasn't an accident, but a void the whole family had deliberately exploited to restart their lives without carrying the moral burden. They forgot you so quickly, Andrew, as if you had never existed. I clenched my fists, anger surging. Having witnessed, through rumors, through stories, me struggling after release while Noah treated that past as a closed chapter, Sophia could no longer deceive herself that it was mere coincidence. Seeing you here, doing heavy labor while Noah lives comfortably, it's not fair, she whispered. In that moment, I realized the most painful thing wasn't the prison years, the lonely nights, the hard labor, but that my sacrifice had been rewritten, distorted, and used as a springboard for others to rise. They used me as a cushion, then discarded me when no longer needed. My heart twisted, tears threatening, but I held them back, listening on. Sophia continued, voice lower. After you went to prison, Noah didn't stop. He continued getting involved in shady dealings, even riskier because he believed the past had been handled. I froze, ears ringing. Shady again? She revealed that during their relationship she'd accidentally seen documents, messages, and calls that made her suspect Noah was still involved in new crimes, smuggling goods, money laundering through his logistics company. I saw him frequently calling strangers, hiding papers in a safe, she said softly. I asked, but he brushed it off, told me not to worry. In that instant, I understood everything. The old sentence hadn't just saved Noah once, it had given him a dangerous belief that someone else would always bear the consequences. And I, the brother who served time for him, was living proof of that invincibility. Sophia admitted, voice shaking. I started to fear, not for you, but for myself. I realized if someone could let their own brother go to prison in their place, then one day I could become the next sacrifice. Her eyes were red, hands gripping the umbrella tightly. That fear had led Sophia to quietly keep evidence and signs of irregularities, screenshots of messages, notes on documents, instead of turning a blind eye like Noah's parents. I couldn't stay silent forever, she said. I kept them just in case. Hearing Sophia finish, everything in me clicked into place. The years abandoned in prison, the promises never fulfilled, the coldness from my parents upon release. It was no longer coincidence, but a deliberate chain of choices. They had planned it, used me as a tool, then discarded me. I realized my sacrifice had been rewritten, distorted, and leveraged for Noah to advance, while I was pushed out of my own family's life like someone whose value had expired. My heart pounded, hot blood rushing to my head. For the first time, I no longer thought about duty or forgiveness, no more for family. I decided I would no longer stay silent, and I would make those who had lived comfortably on my sacrifice pay for what they had done. In the nights following my meeting with Sophia, I lay awake in the moldy rented room, my mind reeling with the fragments of truth. Rain pattered against the window. The rumble of night trucks echoed from the nearby industrial area. But I heard nothing except the whisper of anger inside me. I thought about the evidence Sophia had given me. Screenshots of messages, notes on documents, proving that Noah was still engaged in smuggling and money laundering through his logistics company. He had learned no lesson. On the contrary, my taking the blame seemed to make him more confident, believing someone else would always shield him. I sat up, turned on the tiny desk lamp, and spread the papers out on the table. What should I do? I asked myself, my hand trembling as I held the pen. Sue them? Reopen the old case? It sounded far-fetched and risky, but the pain of betrayal wouldn't let me stop. After many nights of thinking and weighing the dangers, losing my temporary job, retaliation, even threats to my life, I made my decision. I would file a lawsuit. The next morning, I took a day off work and went to the free legal aid office in downtown Toledo. a place that helps the poor. The lawyer, a middle-aged woman named Lisa, listened to my story, her eyes widening gradually. "Do you have evidence?" she asked. I handed over what Sophia had provided along with my own testimony about the old case. She nodded. "This is fraud, abuse of trust, and possibly linked to organized crime. We can petition the court to review the old sentence and bring your brother's recent activities under investigation." I signed the papers, my heart pounding. Andrew filed a lawsuit and related legal petitions regarding the past incident, while providing new documents that put Noah's recent smuggling and money laundering activities under scrutiny. As I left the office, I felt a mix of relief and excitement, as if I'd just dropped a bomb and was now waiting for it to explode. The case quickly attracted local media attention. Just days later, the first articles appeared in the Toledo Blade and online news outlets. "Man who served prison time sues family for taking the blame. Mystery behind brother's logistics empire." They questioned the transparency of the old conviction and Noah's unusually rapid rise after his brother went to prison. Reporters began digging deeper, reaching out to old neighbors and former colleagues of Noah's. I read each article on my old phone during work breaks, my heart racing as if every eye was now on me. Public opinion grew heated. Some sided with me, saying I'd been pushed by my own family to be a scapegoat. Others were skeptical, thinking I was acting out of personal resentment. But amid the conflicting views, the truth was gradually dragged into the light, and I knew that from this moment, there was no turning back. Just 1 week after filing, my parents came to see me. I was in my rented room, just back from a night shift, body exhausted, when the knock sounded. I opened the door, and there they stood, Frank and Diane, faces gaunt, dressed neatly as if for a meeting. My father spoke, voice low. "Andrew, we need to talk." I let them in, heart racing. They sat on the old sofa, looking around the room with discomfort, as if this place was proof of my failure. They didn't ask how I was living, showed no concern for the damp room or my manual labor job. Instead, they focused on blaming me for dredging up the past and making the family the center of scrutiny. "What are you doing?" my mother cried, voice shrill. "The papers are writing all sorts of things. Neighbors are gossiping. Do you want to destroy us?" My father cut in, voice firm. "Withdraw the lawsuit, Andrew. We'll handle it internally. Don't let this go too far." I sat across from them, fists clenched, trying to stay calm. They accused me of being selfish, saying that since I'd agreed to take the blame, I should have stayed silent forever and not disrupt the peace the family had sacrificed to achieve. "Are you jealous of Noah?" my father asked, eyes sharp. "Because he's more successful than you?" "This is just personal grudge, Andrew. You're tearing the family apart out of resentment after prison." Their words cut like knives, but I didn't waver. I responded firmly, voice calm but resolute. "I'm not trying to reclaim the past. I'm just refusing to continue being exploited and rewritten as a shameful figure in the family's story. The truth has to be told. When I still wouldn't yield, my parents shifted to more direct emotional pressure. My mother cried harder, voice breaking in fragments as if every sentence was an accusation. "Have you forgotten, Andrew?" she said through tears. "How we raised you, how hard we worked to feed and educate you, to give you what you have today. And now you're dragging the whole family into the mud? Do you know what you're doing? You're ruining Noah's future," my father added, voice lowering, heavy but decisive, as if speaking for the entire family. "You can hate us, but think about your mother, Andrew. She can't handle this. Are you going to let her live in shame, pointed at and gossiped about for the rest of her life?" I listened to it all, my heart aching as old memories flooded back. The seemingly warm family dinners, the times my father taught me to fix cars in the garage, moments that once made me believe I belonged. But at the same time, I remembered the 5 years in prison, the hopeless waiting, the promises never kept. I took a deep breath, keeping my voice from breaking. "It was my silence in the past that let things go this far," I said, voice trembling slightly but unwavering. "I was silent for 5 years. I took the blame, lost my freedom, lost my life. And in that time, you used my silence to continue living peacefully as if nothing had happened. I looked straight at them, each word slow and clear. I'm no longer protecting anyone but myself. I won't stay silent anymore to let the truth be twisted one more time. I paused for a beat, then said the final words, not loudly but enough to end all argument. This isn't revenge. This is justice. They left after the heated argument, my mother sobbing, my father shaking his head in disappointment. I closed the door, leaned against the wall, breathing heavily. My heart pounded with excitement over what would come next. But I knew I was right. Under mounting public pressure, daily news coverage, social media buzz, authorities officially launched an expanded investigation. Not only examining Noah's new crimes, smuggling goods, money laundering, but also reviewing the full context of the old case. The local FBI got involved, summoning witnesses, searching Noah's company. I was called to the investigation office, sitting in a bright but cold interrogation room, recounting everything. How my parents persuaded me to confess, the promises of housing and assets, how they abandoned me in prison. In sessions with authorities, I fully presented the process of taking the blame, the promises made, and how the family benefited from that sacrifice. They took notes, nodding. This is strong evidence. Noah was summoned multiple times before being detained for the investigation. For the first time, he faced direct legal consequences, no longer with me as a shield. I heard through my lawyer Noah panicked, gave inconsistent statements, but the evidence was overwhelming. The press reported, young entrepreneur detained on suspicion of smuggling linked to shocking family case. I read it with my heart pounding, a mix of excitement and relief. Facing the risk of Noah's conviction, my parents tried to sway public opinion. They hired their own lawyer, used media to smear me, interviews on local TV portraying me as bitter and vengeful out of personal discontent after release. My mother told reporters, voice trembling, Andrew has always been jealous of his brother. He got himself into trouble and now he's turning against the family. We tried to help him, but he chose this path. Those words hit me like cold knives, not because they came from the press or strangers, but because they were spoken by the very people who had once hugged me and promised never to abandon me. I chose silence in the face of the media. I didn't respond to interviews, didn't correct the distortions, didn't defend myself in any publication. I'd said enough over the past 5 years through my silence. And this time, I didn't want the truth further twisted by emotions or pointless arguments. I let everything fall into its proper place, in the investigation files, in the legal proceedings, where truth doesn't need to shout to be heard. This silence was no longer submission, but my final choice to close a cycle that had taken too much from me. The weeks waiting for the official trial were the most nerve-wracking period of my life. Every morning, waking up in the moldy rented room, I checked the news on my old phone, heart pounding when I saw Noah's name in the headlines. Young entrepreneur faces heavy prison sentence for smuggling and money laundering. The expanded investigation had dug deep into his company, turning over the books, interviewing employees, and uncovering a series of evidence: fake invoices, suspicious transfers, even links to larger criminal networks. I learned through my lawyer Lisa, who updated me weekly. They have statements from Noah's partners. He has no way to deny it anymore. I sat there, cold coffee in hand, feeling both relieved and anxious. Would the court be fair? Would the family find a way to turn things around? Each night, sleep came in fits, haunted by chaotic dreams. I saw myself standing in the defendant's position again, but this time it was Noah kneeling and begging. Then the trial day arrived. I entered the courtroom as a related party, sitting in the witness section, back straight, hands resting calmly on my thighs, eyes fixed forward. I no longer felt the trembling from years ago when I stood before the judge, only a cold clarity. In the defendant's seat, Noah sat there. His face was pale, more gaunt than I remembered. The expensive suit draped on him couldn't hide his haggard appearance, making him look even more out of place in the solemn courtroom. His hands were cuffed behind his back, shoulders slightly hunched, eyes darting around before briefly stopping on me. No longer the confident gaze of someone who believed others would always bear the consequences. My parents sat right behind him, Frank and Diane, faces drawn, eyes fixed on me with pure hatred, as if I were their mortal enemy, not their own son. My mother looked at me, eyes red but full of resentment, muttering something under her breath. My father gripped the chair arms tightly, jaw clenched. The courtroom air was heavy, whispers spreading, and I felt it clearly. This was the climax where everything would erupt. The judge, a stern middle-aged man with glasses, banged the gavel to open. The prosecutor began, voice resounding. Today we are trying Noah Collins for charges of goods smuggling and money laundering. They presented overwhelming evidence, leaving no room for denial. Forged transaction documents, partner testimonies, photos of smuggled containers at ports, and recorded calls where Noah discussed handling risks as if it were ordinary business. I sat there, heart racing, recalling my meeting with Sophia, the evidence she provided now pivotal. Reporters scribbled furiously, camera shutters clicking each time a new document was projected. Noah bowed his head. His lawyer tried to defend. My client was influenced by the past, not the mastermind. But the prosecutor interrupted sharply. The past? Let the defendant speak for himself. When cornered, Noah stood, voice trembling under the court's pressure. He admitted the old case wasn't a personal accident, but a family decision for me to take the blame. My parents and I convinced Andrew to confess. He stammered, eyes averted. I didn't want a stain on my record while still young. The courtroom fell dead silent, whispers rising like waves. Noah also admitted that after I went to prison, he continued illegal dealings, believing all risks had been resolved. I thought everything was settled. No more consequences, he said weakly. The truth exposed left the courtroom in heavy silence. Prior defenses became meaningless against the systematic pattern. From small-scale smuggling to large networks, all meticulously planned. I was called to the witness stand, steps heavy on the polished wooden floor. Under the bright lights, I recounted everything. The fateful dinner, my parents' promises, the 5 lonely years in prison, and how they abandoned me. My voice was calm, but inside waves surged. The judge listened, nodding. The prosecutor asked, "Do you regret it?" I shook my head. No. But I regret believing my sacrifice would be acknowledged. My parents below, mother sobbing quietly, father head bowed, but their eyes still full of hatred. Noah looked at me, face twisted, as if he couldn't believe everything was collapsing. After tense deliberation, time I spent in the hallway, fists clenched, cold sweat despite the chill, the judge returned. The gavel banged and the sentence was announced. The court sentenced Noah to 10 years in federal prison for goods smuggling, money laundering, and intentional recidivism, officially ending his path of evading responsibility. 10 years. The number echoed in my mind, double what I'd endured. The courtroom erupted in whispers. Reporters rushed out to make calls. Noah collapsed, face ashen. His lawyer patted his shoulder futilely. As Noah was escorted out, my parents broke down, crying and lashing out at me. My mother lunged toward me, pointing accusingly. "You've destroyed the family. You've driven your brother into a dead end." My father growled, "Are you satisfied now, Andrew? You're a traitor." Those words stabbed like knives, but I stood still, silent. Noah glanced back at me one last time with eyes mixing resentment, confusion, and lingering dependence, as if still waiting for me to step in and bear the rest. He looked at me, lips moving silently, but guards pushed him away, handcuffs clinking. I left the courtroom in silence, not looking back, not responding. Stepping onto Toledo's streets, cold wind whipping my face, but this time I felt no loss. Only emptiness after the truth was spoken, like a wound that had closed, scar remaining. Reporters swarmed, microphones thrust forward. "Mr. Collins, how do you feel now that you've been vindicated?" I shook my head, pushed through the crowd back to my room. That night, lying on the bed, staring at the ceiling, tears rolled down. not from sadness but relief. Finally, the cycle was closed. A month later, as everything quieted down, media moving on, public forgetting, I received a visitation request letter from Noah. Sent from federal prison, handwriting shaky. "Brother Andrew, I want to see you. Please." I hesitated, holding the letter, heart pounding. Why now? After everything? I thought of the years he abandoned me, but part of me wanted one final confrontation with that unequal relationship. After 2 weeks, I decided to visit my brother at the prison so familiar to me, but now roles reversed. In the visitation room, through thick glass, Noah sat opposite me in a faded orange prison uniform. His face was gaunt, eyes dark from sleeplessness. Seeing me, he picked up the receiver, voice hoarse. "You finally came." I nodded, no smile, no extra words. I just picked up the phone, waiting for him to speak. Noah took a deep breath, as if rehearsing a prepared defense. "Back then, I was still in college. I didn't think I was doing anything too serious. Just some opportunities to make extra money. Every student is broke, you know that." He paused, then continued, tone more justificatory than remorseful. "The people who introduced it said it was safe. Just signing papers, transporting a few things, no big deal. I thought, at worst an administrative fine, not something this huge." I listened silently. Noah took another deep breath, eyes shifting away for the next words. "Besides, after what happened with you, I thought if there was risk, the family could handle it. I'd seen it before. When things went wrong, someone always stepped up to bear it." Those words tightened my chest like being squeezed from inside. But I didn't interrupt. Noah looked up at me through the glass, eyes more bewildered than repentant. "I never expected it to go this far. I thought there was always a way out." Then his voice broke, turning pleading. "I can't stand it here, brother. I'm scared in here. Can you help me one more time? Just tell the court I'm truly remorseful. Ask them to reduce my sentence. I promise. This time I'll change." In that moment, I understood that my parents' blind favoritism and protection had instilled in Noah the belief that responsibility could always be shifted to someone else. He'd grown up that way, spoiled, covered for. And now, facing it, he crumbled not from conscience, but from losing his shield. I looked at my brother through the glass, heart aching with childhood memories flooding back, playing ball together, sharing secrets, but kept my voice steady. "Noah, you have to bear your own consequences. No one will take them for you anymore." He cried harder, begging, but I stood up, hung up the phone. Andrew left the prison with cold clarity. Not everyone who errs wants to change, and not every blood tie deserves another rescue. I stepped through the gate, cold wind whipping but my heart lighter. This was the last time I looked back at the past. After the trial, everything gradually settled like a storm passing. The details of the old case were clarified bit by bit. Local media in Toledo reported continuously, legal experts analyzed, and finally the court officially declared me innocent in the previous conviction. I was exonerated with an official statement from the prosecutor. Andrew Collins was exploited and coerced into taking the blame for another. They vacated the prior conviction, wiping my criminal record clean like the last stain finally removed. But even so, the lost years could not be reclaimed. 5 years in prison, the lonely nights, grueling labor, and betrayal remained like a deep scar in my heart. I received a small compensation from the government, enough to start over, but money couldn't buy back time. I stood in front of the mirror in my rented room, looking at a face older than my years, and wondered, what will I do with this freedom? The Toledo air was chilly then, autumn leaves covering the streets, and I felt excited, not fearful, but anticipating a new chapter, however fragile it might be. With a clean record, I began job hunting. No longer rejected because of a criminal history, but I harbored no grand dreams. I applied to technical workshops in the industrial suburbs where skilled labor for machinery repair was needed. After several tense interviews, heart racing when they asked about the gap in my resume, I found a stable job in technical labor. working as an equipment repair technician at an electronics components manufacturing plant. Not glamorous like my old supervisory role with pay just enough to live, but sufficient for me to stand on my own. Early mornings I woke at 5 a.m., brewed black coffee in the rented room and rode my old bicycle to the factory. The work was straightforward, inspecting assembly lines, fixing faulty valves, wiping off grease. With steady income, I moved to a small, simple apartment in a quiet residential area near the factory. No longer a moldy rented room, but a one-bedroom with a small kitchen, an old sofa bought second-hand at a flea market, and a window overlooking a park. I began rebuilding daily life from the basics. Fixed routines, healthy breakfasts with toasted bread and eggs, regular work and independence, cooking for myself, doing laundry, even planting a few potted greens on the balcony to make the apartment less empty. Evenings I sat reading adventure novels to escape and felt a fragile peace. But sometimes loneliness struck, making me anxiously wonder, will I live like this forever? Toledo now felt like a new city with familiar streets carrying painful memories, but I learned to move past them. My parents completely cut off contact after the trial. No calls, no letters, no apologies or inquiries. Their silence was like a concrete wall, leaving a cold void I had to learn to accept. At first it hurt. I stared at my phone hoping for a message, but nothing came. I thought about them. My father at the dinner table, my mother in the kitchen, the peaceful life they had protected at all costs. Now, with Noah in prison, they were probably struggling with public opinion and neighbor gossip, but they chose silence toward me. That void made me lonely with long, sleepless nights, but gradually I learned to fill it with work and new habits. The initial anxiety turned into resilience. I would no longer let them define me. In the prolonged loneliness after being completely cut off by my family, I gradually realized that amid that cold emptiness, there was still one fragile anchor. The only person who hadn't turned away from me from the beginning was Sophia. Quietly, without demands, she appeared through discreet meetings, the evidence she kept, and a rare sincerity that required no sacrifice from me. In that dark period of life, her presence was the only light strong enough to keep me from falling. I thought about her often, about how she listened without judgment, about her uneasy but resolute eyes when telling the truth. One afternoon after my shift, I gathered my courage and called her. "Sophia, can we meet just to say thank you?" She agreed, voice gentle. "Of course, Andrew. I want to see you too." We met at a small cafe near the industrial area where I'd first encountered her. I arrived early, sitting in the corner, hands tightly gripping a hot coffee cup, heart racing like a first date. Sophia walked in, wearing a warm coat, hair loose, with a gentle smile. "How's work been lately?" she asked, sitting down. I had initiated the meeting to express gratitude, not just for what she'd done, providing evidence, standing by me, but for choosing truth when everyone else stayed silent or washed their hands. "You're the only one who didn't abandon me," I said, voice trembling. "When my parents turned away, Noah betrayed me, you were still there. Thank you." Sophia listened in silence, her eyes softening without judgment or pity. Just as if, for the first time, someone truly saw me as I was. Not a victim, not a hero, just Andrew, a weary but resilient man. From then on, we met more often. The initial encounters were brief and cautious, like two strangers probing each other. We sat in the cafe talking about work, she as an office worker at a different logistics company, me about machine repairs at the factory. Silences interspersed, unnamed yet, but not awkward. I felt excited each time, wondering, what does she think of me? But gradually, conversations became more natural. We shared about family, she about her parents' divorce, the childhood feeling of displacement, me about sacrifices for Noah, the pain of abandonment. We talked about different wounds, about surviving choices not our own. She with a toxic past relationship, me with 5 years in prison. Meetings stretched longer, from coffee to park walks, and I felt a slow connection forming. Between us, there was no rush or grand promises. The relationship developed gradually based on understanding and the long-lost sense of safety for both. One evening, walking under chilly Toledo skies, she gently took my hand and I didn't pull away. Not dramatic emotion, no cheesy confessions, just the calm of two wounded people finding genuine, simple companionship. When we came together, it wasn't from emotional climax, but a peaceful choice. She by my side through sleepless nights, me listening to her dreams for the future. We cooked together in my small apartment, simple pasta, laughing as flour flew everywhere, and warmth crept in, chasing away loneliness. I realized that for the first time in life, I didn't need to sacrifice or strive to deserve someone's affection. My presence was simply enough. With Sophia, I wasn't the older brother bearing burdens, not a victim needing rescue, just myself, with my scars and strength. We spent weekends strolling streets, shopping for apartment items, and I felt life gradually becoming fuller. We spent time on small everyday things like rearranging the apartment, moving the sofa to create a reading nook, hanging a hand-painted picture she made on the wall. I told her about my old dreams, about once wanting to be a supervisor at a big factory, but now content with technical repair work. I don't need anything flashy anymore, I just need this, I said one evening as we sat on the balcony watching the streetlights flicker. Sophia leaned her head on my shoulder and whispered, "Me too. With you, everything feels simpler." Those moments were filled with emotion, making me realize that love isn't blind sacrifice but peaceful companionship. I began sleeping better, no longer haunted by nightmares of prison or family. Toledo now felt like a friendlier city with familiar streets carrying new hope. One ordinary morning while I was in the small apartment with Sophia, everything proceeded as usual. I woke up early, brewed black coffee in the tiny kitchen, the aroma filling the air with coziness. Sophia was still asleep, hair tousled on the pillow, a dreamy smile on her face. I turned on the TV in the living room, the local news channel, sipping coffee while half listening to the Toledo weather report. Chilly, possible light rain. Then the breaking news announced a prison escape that had occurred overnight at a nearby federal facility. At first I didn't pay much attention, thinking it was just minor news. Such things happened occasionally. But the anchor elaborated. Police are searching for a dangerous escaped prisoner from the federal prison on the outskirts of Toledo. The inmate faked a severe illness, was transported for emergency medical care, and took advantage of the chaos to flee. The identified escapee is Noah Collins, 27 years old, serving a 10-year sentence for smuggling and money laundering. I froze, the coffee cup nearly slipping from my hand. Noah Collins? My brother? His name exploded in my head like a bomb, blurring the world around me. I stood there, eyes glued to the screen where they showed his photo. A gaunt face, bloodshot eyes from the prison file. According to the report, Noah had pretended to have a severe heart attack, was taken to a local hospital by ambulance, and amid the chaos, nurses scrambling, guards distracted, he overpowered a medical staff member and fled into the darkness. Police were blocking off areas, warning that he could be dangerous and possibly armed. My heart pounded, blood rushing to my ears, a vague fear rising. Sophia woke up from the TV noise, walking into the living room in rumpled pajamas, rubbing her eyes. "What's wrong, honey? You look panicked," she asked, voice sleepy. But when she saw the screen, she froze too. The air in the room instantly grew heavy, as if all the oxygen had been sucked out. We were bewildered, terrified, realizing the danger was no longer hypothetical but real. "Your brother. He escaped from prison," I said, voice hoarse. I nodded, but my mind was already spinning. Noah knew this apartment's address. He'd sent letters from prison filled only with pleas and blame. And I knew one thing clearly. With that pent-up hatred, if Noah was on the run, the first place he'd think of was me. Before we could react further, less than 30 minutes after the news, the apartment door suddenly burst open violently as if kicked in. The loud crash shattered the fragile morning quiet. Wood splintered, hinges screeched. Noah appeared in the doorway, disheveled, eyes bloodshot like a wild animal's, gaunt in torn prison clothes, face scratched and sweaty. He panted, staring at me and Sophia as if all his hatred converged in this moment. My heart tightened, blood freezing. My mouth stammered his name, standing slowly, hands raised to calm. Sophia let out a small scream, backing toward the kitchen, face pale. Noah charged into the living room, slamming the door behind him with a kick that shook the wall. He gasped for breath, eyes bloodshot, sweat and rain still clinging to his clothes. He roared, pointing straight at me. "What have you done to me, Andrew?" He didn't wait for an answer. Words poured out like a long-dammed flood. You put me in prison. You dragged everything I had into the mud." Noah let out a harsh laugh, twisted and broken. "I had a company, money, a bright future. It was all supposed to be mine. Then you showed up, playing hero, dragging me to hell." His hands flailed wildly, each word like a knife thrown without aim. "You're jealous of me. You couldn't stand me living better than you after you got out, right?" I looked straight into his eyes and realized what chilled me to the bone. There was nothing familiar left in that gaze. Not the brother I'd protected, but a person consumed by hatred. "Noah, calm down," I said, voice shaking but trying to keep it low and slow. "Let's talk. I never wanted to hurt you. I never wanted you to end up like this." I stepped slowly toward him, hands raised, trying to keep things from spiraling. "Remember when we were kids playing ball in the backyard? You fell and I bandaged your knee. I never wanted to face you like this." Noah shook his head violently, eyes glaring. "Talk?" he yelled. "You've said enough. At court, you betrayed me." Then his gaze shifted to Sophia, standing frozen behind me. Noah's face twitched, voice dropping but far colder. He spoke slowly, each word ground through teeth. "I trusted you," he said, words forced from his throat. "And in the end, you chose to side with him." Sophia trembled but didn't back down. She took a deep breath, voice breaking but unflinching. "I didn't betray you, Noah. I just couldn't keep lying and watch you drag more people down with you." Noah laughed harshly, hollow and empty. "Great. When did you two team up? My brother ruins me, and then even you. I'm the fool in the end." He turned back to me, eyes burning with hatred. "You think you've won, Andrew? You think dragging me down means you'll be safe?" The air in the room thickened. I knew in that moment all boundaries had vanished. No words could pull Noah back. He was desperate, feeling absolutely betrayed, ready to do anything to drag me down with him. Sophia backed away in fear, hand over her mouth, eyes wide in horror. "Noah, stop!" she screamed, voice shattering. But Noah had completely lost control. Hatred erupted fiercely, and he lunged at me like a cornered beast. We grappled in the cramped apartment, sofa overturning, coffee cups shattering on the floor, gasps and thuds echoing. I tried to hold Noah down, gripping his arms to prevent harm to Sophia. "Run, honey. Call the police." I shouted, urging her to escape and get help, prioritizing her safety. She hesitated, eyes red, but then bolted out the door, crying for help. "Help us. An escaped prisoner is attacking us." Her footsteps echoed in the hallway, leaving me alone facing Noah in his frenzy. Noah thrashed wildly, strength fueled by desperation making him stronger than I'd imagined. "You stole everything from me," he roared, a punch to my chest staggering me. I held on tightly, voice nearly breaking. "Noah, stop. We're brothers." But Noah's eyes were utterly uncontrolled, bloodshot with hatred. In that chaotic moment, I saw his hand reach into his pocket. A small folding knife appeared, likely something he'd grabbed during escape. I barely registered the glint of metal under the light before excruciating pain hit. My body reacted before my mind processed it. I staggered back, breath ragged, strength draining second by second. I collapsed to the floor, ears ringing, surrounding sounds distorting and fading. In fading consciousness, I saw Noah freeze briefly, eyes wide in panic, as if he couldn't believe what he'd done. Then he turned and fled, rushing toward the back door. Footsteps pounded, the door burst open, and Noah vanished into the hallway darkness, leaving a terrifyingly silent room behind. I lay on the floor, blood pooling, Consciousness blurred, the world smearing, distant sirens approaching, ambulances, and Sophia rushing back, screaming my name. She cried, kneeling beside me, pressing the wound. But darkness closed in, the line between life and death thinner than ever. In that hazy state, I thought of the journey, sacrifice, betrayal, vindication, and now, perhaps the end. Tense, dramatic, but no regrets. I'd survived hell, and if this was the end, at least I'd lived truly. When I woke up in the hospital room, pain surged through my body like a violent wave. My shoulder and abdomen burned fiercely as if fire raged inside, every breath pulling at the stitches. I opened my eyes slowly, the glaring fluorescent lights making me blink repeatedly. The strong smell of disinfectant filled the air, and the steady beeps of the heart monitor echoed rhythmically. I tried to move, but my body felt heavy, as if weighed down by an invisible stone. Then I saw her, Sophia, sitting beside the bed, her face etched with worry and exhaustion, dark circles under her eyes from staying awake all night, but her gaze bursting with relief upon realizing I was still alive. She whispered, gripping my hand tightly, tears streaming down her cheeks. "You're awake. Oh God, you're awake." Her voice trembled with emotion, and in that moment I clearly felt I had returned from the brink of death. Sophia immediately called for the doctor, voice urgent. "Doctor, he's awake." A middle-aged doctor entered quickly, followed by a nurse with a tray of instruments. They examined me, checking my pulse, inspecting the wounds, asking briefly, "How do you feel? Is the pain severe?" I nodded weakly in confirmation. The doctor explained, voice serious. "You were brought in critical condition with severe blood loss from 2 stab wounds. We had to perform emergency treatment, transfuse blood, and operate for 3 hours to suture the wounds and prevent infection. You were very lucky, Andrew." Just a few minutes later, he shook his head, leaving the sentence unfinished. I lay there listening, heart racing with delayed fear. Critical condition. That phrase had seemed distant, but now it was so real it sent chills through me. Sophia sat beside me, still holding my hand tightly, as if afraid to let go and lose me. In the days that followed in the hospital, Sophia stayed by my side almost constantly. She took leave from work, sleeping on the hard sofa beside the bed, tending to every small need, wiping my face with a damp cloth, spoon-feeding me thin porridge when I couldn't sit up, even reading aloud to ease my boredom. Not out of obligation or pity, but from voluntary, calm choice. She was there because she loved me, simply that. Those moments were deeply emotional, making me realize what true love is, not grand sacrifices, but daily presence through the little things. I looked at her, heart warming amid the pain, and whispered, "Thank you for taking care of me." She smiled, eyes glistening. "You're everything to me." From Sophia's account, I learned Noah had been recaptured shortly after. She recounted the details, voice still trembling from fresh memories. After I ran out and called the police, they arrived quickly. Noah fled toward the woods near the residential area, but the police sealed it off fast. They found him hiding in an abandoned warehouse just hours later. The escape ended swiftly, and this time there was no way out for your brother. He was returned to prison with additional charges for escape and assault. I listened, lying in the hospital bed, feeling more empty than relieved. All anger had drained away, leaving only the weariness of someone who had just crossed the line between life and death. Noah, my brother, once the center of my life, now just a distant shadow. I felt no joy at his recapture, no lingering resentment, only fatigue, as if all emotions had been sucked dry. During my hospital stay, Frank and Diane visited multiple times, something I truly hadn't expected. The first time, they entered the room looking gaunt. My mother burst into tears at the door. "My Andrew, how did it come to this?" While my father stood behind, holding a bouquet, voice choked as he said they had come to see me. No longer avoiding or justifying as before, they openly admitted the decision years ago was a grave mistake that had destroyed my life. My mother sat by the bed, gripping my hand tightly, tears flowing. "I'm sorry, son. We were wrong to force you to take the blame for Noah. We thought we were protecting the family, but we were the ones destroying it." My father spoke slowly, voice low and weary. We favored Noah too much, spoiled him blindly. You always shouldered everything while your brother never learned responsibility. We pushed both of you down the wrong paths. For the first time, they named the problem outright: favoritism, misguided protection, and taking my sacrifices for granted. We grew used to relying on you, my father said, eyes red, while covering every mistake Noah made. That was the seed of the tragedy, not just for you, but for this whole family. Those words carried no excuses. And this time, their care wasn't obligation or formality. They stayed longer, asking where it hurt, how I was eating, handling hospital paperwork, even bringing home-cooked meals from my mother. That belated remorse couldn't erase the years I'd lost, but it surprised me. Amid physical pain, my heart softened. Not because everything was forgiven, but because, for the first time, they faced their own mistakes directly. I accepted their care without rejecting it, but without letting emotions pull me back into the old role. When my mother cried and begged forgiveness, I said calmly, I accept the apology, but forgiveness, if it comes, doesn't mean continuing to sacrifice or erasing the boundaries I've set. We can meet, but I won't bear the burden anymore. They nodded, eyes red, and from then on visits became lighter. No pressure, just simple sharing about life. After discharge, my parents continued checking in and helping within their means, covering hospital costs, calling weekly. I remained calm without resentment, but without letting closeness cross limits that could hurt me again. We met at neutral cafes, talking about weather, work, but not delving into the past. As everything gradually closed, the wounds healing, police confirming Noah's stricter confinement with no escape chance, Sophia and I moved toward marriage with a simple decision. No fanfare, no need to prove anything to anyone. One warm, sunny afternoon in Toledo, we went to the civil court, signing the marriage papers with 2 witnesses from my workplace friends. No party, no extravagant wedding dress, just the 2 of us holding hands, promising companionship. We went home, cooked a special dinner, grilled steak and wine, and laughed through the night. Exciting because marriage sounds grand, but for us it was just the natural next step. We began a peaceful life, where I no longer had to bear others' mistakes or trade myself to stay in a relationship. The small apartment now truly became a home. We renovated it, added furniture, even adopted a fluffy cat named Whiskers to fill it with laughter. I advanced at the factory, becoming repair team leader with pay enough to save for our first trip. A week at Lake Erie, just the 2 of us. Sophia continued her office job, but we shared everything. Cooking, cleaning, evenings, cuddling, watching movies. No more fear of the past, though sometimes news about Noah in prison made me reflect, but I pushed it away. Looking back on the journey, I understood that family isn't a place demanding unconditional sacrifice, but one where love comes with responsibility and boundaries. The prison years, betrayal, and even Noah's crazed attack taught me that lesson, painful but necessary. The insight I gained wasn't from lofty advice, but from my own losses. Sometimes daring to say no, to walk away from toxic relationships, and to protect oneself isn't selfish. It's the only way to preserve a peaceful, deserving life. One evening, I sat on the balcony, Sophia gently leaning her head on my shoulder. Over the Toledo sky, stars twinkled quietly without noise or show. In that moment, I clearly felt I'd gone through it all and finally found what I needed. Not victory, not proof, but peace. No more drama, no more straining. Just simple, fulfilling happiness in a very real way. And for me, that was enough.